Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. We've got an exciting international audience joining us today for what's going to be a really terrific conversation with Mayor Mick Cornett. We are going to be starting in exactly 1 minute. All right. Terrific. Well, again, welcome to anyone who has just joined us from anywhere in the world. It's my distinct honor to welcome Mayor Mick Cornett to join us for this leadership series. Mick, as most of you know, is the former four-term mayor of Oklahoma City. He's a former TV personality, a businessman. He, in 2018, was named to Fortune magazine's list of the 50 greatest leaders in the world. Newsweek called him one of the 5 most innovative mayors in America. The European-based World Mayor Organization named him the second best mayor in the world, and Governing Magazine proclaimed him a public official of the year. And he was the president of the United States Conference of Mayors in 2016 to 2017. He is, among the many things that Mayor Cornett is well known for, is addressing in Oklahoma City the community's shortcomings in the area of health and wellness. And for basketball fans, you'll know well that he's known for bringing the NBA franchise to Oklahoma City. Mayor Cornett has also appeared on shows and leadership talks, from Ellen to Bill Maher. And I feel, Mick, maybe we should dance with the mention of Ellen. I'm not sure if you did that when you're on the show, but it's really terrific to have you here, especially at the time of everything that we're going through. So Mayor Cornett, if we just go right into the question that we've seen from so many people ahead of this, is what was your aha moment that served as a catalyst for that huge change that you led in Oklahoma City?
Well, we had been placed on the list of the most obese cities in the country. And I was embarrassed by it, felt inspired to do something, but I didn't know what. I usually pride myself in having an answer to almost any question the media can provide. But when it came to what are you going to do about our city's obesity problem, I didn't have a quick answer or a quick solution. In fact, I had been obese myself for most of my adult life. And so I started losing weight, but I really didn't feel comfortable talking about it or really talking about the city's issues because I didn't know what to say. And so I studied the issue for literally months. And I looked at our city's infrastructure. I was trying to figure out why we had a problem with obesity. And I finally came to the conclusion that I may not have the magic pill, that's going to cure this problem because it's been with us for a long, long time. But I do know this. In Oklahoma City, we were afraid to talk about it. It seemed like obesity was a subject that was very personal, sort of invasive for a government or really a person in any leadership role to take on. And so our kind of response to our community's obesity problem was to do nothing and just hope it goes away. And obviously we could see that wasn't going to happen. All you had to do was look at the next generation, and you could see that generation was likely to be more obese than the adults had been. And so I took the conclusion of all that was that I didn't know the answer, but I did know this: whatever the solution is, it's got to start with a conversation. We've got to feel more comfortable talking about obesity, whether it's two neighbors talking over the backyard fence, or a husband and wife talking, or parents and children, or a pastor and a congregation. In all of those settings, there were no conversations of any significance taking place about obesity. And so I thought, well, how can I lift the veil off of this really tough topic? What can I do that kind of forces the community to confront it and to discuss it openly. And what I came up with was, in some ways a PR stunt, but it was done to penetrate a message that obesity is real. It's a problem we need to take on. And it's something that people are going to have to decide in their own lives that they're interested in addressing. But what I did was, as the mayor of Oklahoma City, I went to our city's zoo and I stood in front of the elephants, and I announced that I was placing the entire city on a diet and that we were all going to lose 1,000,000 pounds. And looking back, I think the audacity of it was a good part of the reason that it got so much traction. The media was extremely receptive, first of all, in Oklahoma City, because here was a topic, the media loves health stories to begin with. So here's a mayor that's willing to talk about a subject that, frankly, they don't get a lot of people to talk about for the reasons that I mentioned. And so I was talking about the fact that we need to do something about it, and that we had started a website, This City is Going on a Diet.com, and people could sign up and they could, give us what they weighed, tell the website what you weigh and what your goal weight is. And as you get closer to your goal weight, we will add up the pounds and accumulate our success story. And so almost immediately, we had, first hundreds, then thousands, and then the national media got a hold of the story. And it literally, we had millions of hits coming into the website. And ultimately, I'm jumping, nearly 3 years into the future. 47,000 people signed up, and we lost 1,000,000 pounds. Now, a lot happened in that 3-year span, and I became the most unlikely spokesperson for obesity that anyone could write a description for. But my initial instinct was right. We had to have a conversation. We have to be able to lift the veil off the subject of obesity and feel like it's a subject that we can talk about. Because certainly when you look at the healthcare costs that are going on in our country, it's a worthwhile conversation.
An amazing journey, an amazing shift for the city. One challenge for a lot of both leaders of cities, and we've got CEOs of companies and HR leaders and C-suite executives from not just across the country, but globally, Mayor Cornett, who have joined us today. A big question that they have is, how did you maintain that excitement, right? You often launch initiatives, you get the initial boost. 4 years is a real success in keeping that going. How did you maintain that?
Yeah, that's a great question, because you're exactly right. What I didn't want to do was to do one more government initiative on obesity and have it disappear in 24 hours, because that was the history of almost any effort that had been made by government. And usually it was more around fitness than it was around weight loss. We never backed off the fact that if you're obese, you need to eat differently. Which was another significant difference in every other program that had come before us. But here's what I did. I mentioned that the media had become very helpful, and I had a background in the media and knew what types of stories that they might be willing to help produce to keep it in front of our general population. But every 3 months, I would hold a press conference, and I would bring some of our more productive weight loss students into the press conference with me. And the media loves weight loss stories. And we had, we had, a lot to choose from. And we would just go on the website and say, if you'd like to tell your story, send us an email, and the emails would come. And so you had people that had lost, in the beginning, 10 or 20 or 50 pounds. And then later, they'd even lost more than that, or entire families would come forward and talk about their stories. And I remember, I think at the first weigh-in, I stood, and when we reached 250,000 pounds, so a fourth of the way of our goal, I stood in front of 2 really large airplanes at our Air National Guard. And I was told these airplanes weighed 125,000 pounds each. And so I was showing, literally with these 2 large airplanes behind me, how much weight Oklahoma City had lost. And one thing I should keep in mind here, or one our audience to keep in mind is I'm under no false illusion that Oklahoma City lost 1 million pounds and there weren't other people that were gaining weight at the same time. This was an awareness campaign. It really wasn't, what you would call a health campaign. And I know, there's a lot of doctors and nutritionists who are completely vested in this topic, and I'm not. I've received no formal education in these areas. I just know how to communicate to people and how to draw attention and how to help people, move in a positive direction for their own lives. But I do know on the awareness side, we greatly increase the awareness of the problems of obesity and what people can do to direct, more positive change in their lives. And here's the key: when they're ready to do it, because the time to go on a diet is not when the mayor says. I mean, let's be frank about that. The time to go on the diet is when you're ready. But in our sense, it felt like you had an entire community that was there as your support group when you were ready.
And that piece, Mayor Cornett, of the entire community is one of the striking things about the success that you had. And it's something that we see, where when you get leaders of companies or senior executives in companies who are saying, we're going to do this together, and we're going to take classes live with you, or we're going to set this goal together, it takes the pressure of being off individuals and struggling, how am I going to do it, versus I'm part of a momentum. So can you speak a bit about that, about how people felt they were in this together as something bigger than them, and how others can move away from the I to the we that you were able to achieve?
Well, because we had lifted the veil off of the topic, you had people talking about it. And for instance, individual business owners, and some of these businesses didn't have thousands of employees. What we found was the really large companies already had some level of a program in place, but most companies, think of the people with the business owners with 50 or 500 employees. They didn't have the resources to put something together, and here we were handing them a kind of program ready fit. They could use our website to sign their own employees up, and we added kind of a group function to it so they could name their group, and they would know how much weight their group had lost and how many people from their group had signed up, and they could compete against other groups, or however they wanted to do it. And so we really became a facilitator for any group that wanted to get involved as well. And so, there's a lot of groups already formed. And so, people would just talk amongst each other and say, hey, let's get involved in this. Let's help out the mayor's program, and let's get involved, and let's, see if we can help them reach the 1 million pounds. But all of that was, important in getting the project to grow and become more sustainable. What I found was that, after I came out and started talking about my own weight loss, which I really didn't know I was going to have to do. I was a little naive in that respect. I thought I could just come out and talk about the city's need to diet. And yeah, I had lost weight, but I didn't really want to talk about, I mean, who wants to talk about their own weight loss? And that's not anybody's favorite subject. But the media kind of insisted that if I was going to place the city on a diet, I had to kind of talk about my own struggles. And so I became very comfortable doing it. And do so quite frequently anymore. But I remember, it's not my instinct. It's whose instinct is it to talk about being overweight, with their family or friends or people they don't even know. And I was kind of suddenly placed into that position. But I found was that what I found was that churches were setting up their own little programs, and it kind of, I think on examination, this is what I learned: that losing weight, struggling with obesity is very personal. It's very defeating. It's emotional. You diet all weekend and you get on the scales Monday morning and you've gained a pound. I mean, almost anybody who has battled weight loss has done that, and it's so defeating. Here you felt like you were doing all the right things, and for whatever reason, the weight that shows up on the scales didn't go in the direction you wanted. Um, but in this sense, it's very important that the people around you, whether it's your company, your organization where you work, or your church organization, or whichever organization you're participating with, it kind of feels like you're not alone, because battling obesity can be a very lonely thing. And in Oklahoma City's sense, it was kind of like, hey, we're all doing this together, and we know it's hard. But when you're ready to take it on, we're going to be here for you.
And it's that power of community that's so powerful. And Mayor Cornett, you just commented on how you had business leaders signing up their companies and their employees to participate in this. This is the area that we focus on at Burnalong, is working with cities and employers for their employees. And it's always a challenge for leaders within companies to make that broader business case of, this is why we're focusing on health and wellness of our employees. This is why it's so important. How did you convey that to the business leaders in Oklahoma City?
Well, I think they conveyed it to me, because I learned so much along the way. But they're all, looking for ways to lower their healthcare costs. Almost anybody in a leadership position for a company realizes that healthcare costs are going up a few points every year. And if you can have a healthier populace, in your program, you're going to be able to save healthcare costs long term. And so it's really in your best interest to try and have a healthier group of people working inside your insurance plan. So I mean, I think that's just natural. Almost anybody who deals in HR or is involved in budgetary controls at a company that has some sort of health insurance plan understands that. If only we had a healthier workforce, we could save X, or maybe one year, our healthcare costs don't go up, or whatever the metric might be. But it's one thing that when you look out on the horizon, you just see healthcare costs going up and up and up. At the same time, you're trying to increase benefits for your employees, but having to see the costs go the other way on an extremely important bottom line item.
Would completely agree with that. The other thing that we see is the impact on morale, retention, people feeling just happy, the impact on their families. How much did you see that wider effect within Oklahoma?
Well, I think there's some satisfaction with weight loss, because whenever you accomplish something, you have some level of satisfaction about it. But when you accomplish something that is hard, you have an even greater level of satisfaction, and that builds confidence, and that's more likely a better employee. So yeah, and the way I looked at it, I was also a mayor who concentrated on job creation. And I thought to myself, well, if a CEO is looking at relocating to Oklahoma City, they're going to ask themselves, if I move this company there, what are my healthcare costs going to be? What's my absenteeism rate going to be? Is this a community that really values its health? And there was little evidence that it did. And so it gave Oklahoma City a positive story to tell when it came to health and wellness. And I think it's the same thing for a company. I think every private company or government entity wants to think that it values health and sends a positive message about health to its employees. They want to be known for that. They want it to be part of their culture. And this is one way that you can prove it. You can talk about how you can create an opportunity for people to take proactive steps to improve their life and build more confidence in themselves, and at the same time improve the culture of your organization.
And is it safe to say then that you did have success in attracting businesses because of the campaign and changing how people viewed Oklahoma City?
Well, you need a story to tell.
Right.
And if I'm trying to talk to a company who's thinking about moving to Oklahoma City, and they come back to me and say, well, I see you're one of the fattest cities in the country. and I don't have a good response, that's not a likely way to have a productive conversation about moving to my community. But we were able to turn that around and say, look, this is a problem everywhere. We're a city that's doing something about it. You want to be part of our story? You want to be the part of a community that's trying to do better? And I think that was a compelling story to get them to be involved.
One of the big things that we see, and this is always a question from HR leaders and leaders in companies, is that some people are, the last thing they want to do is go to a gym or studio. The last thing they want is a stranger watching them exercise in spandex. And especially when you're dealing with obesity, it's a very, very private piece. I mean, we work with hospitals on bariatric programs. It's a very challenging piece. How did you think about meeting people where they are and understanding that going to the gym publicly isn't for everyone?
Yeah, one of the I love the way you said meet people where they are, because all I was really, talking about was doing better.
Mhm.
And one of the examples was we established a relationship with Taco Bell. Now, the CEO of Taco Bell saw me on the Ellen DeGeneres show, and wanted to create kind of a program around some of the healthier items on the Taco Bell menu. Now, you may scoff and say, really, healthy items on the Taco Bell menu? But the reality is that some items have fewer calories than others, and there are choices you can make, like no sour cream or no cheese or whatever. And that was about getting people to think how they could do better, make small life changes that might be helpful. And it's all about taking a step in the right direction. Um, in this case, what Taco Bell did is they put a life-size cutout of me in all 45 of the Taco Bells in the Oklahoma City metro. And the headline under this life-size cutout of me inside the lobby was, "Because you can't lose 1,000,000 pounds by yourself."
Hmm.
And it was promoting some of the healthier items on the Taco Bell menu. And Oklahoma City has a reputation for being very friendly to fast food operators. Land is cheap, and so the fast food drive-through business model works very well in kind of a suburban, urban sprawl type development like Oklahoma City presents. And so we had a specific issue with fast food and too many people, eating in their car and eating the wrong things. And so, when I would speak to a medical community, basically MDs, they didn't necessarily approve of the fact that I was establishing a relationship with Taco Bell. But, I think the fact that I didn't have any medical degrees or any formal training actually was helpful, because I know how to communicate to people, and I can say, look, this is how we're going to do better. These are choices you can make that would be a better choice than the choices you were making yesterday. Because when you really talk about it, if you're obese, it's almost certainly about what you eat and how much you eat. You're not going to exercise your way out of obesity. And almost every government program, and frankly, almost every organization, private sector or government organization, when they enact some sort of health or wellness campaign about being overweight, it's almost always about getting fit or exercising. And I think they actually do the issue of obesity a little bit of a disservice when they do that, because I think the message on exercise should be to everyone, because everyone should exercise. But if you're obese, you're going to have to do more than just exercise. You're going to have to examine what do I eat and how much do I eat? And do I need to make an adjustment in either one of those categories, or maybe both? Because your food intake is the most important factor in obesity. And a lot of times, because it's a tough topic to discuss, we just want to pretend if you'll start walking after dinner that the pounds are going to come right off, and that's just not realistic.
Mhm. I mean, we completely agree with that, and it's not just calories out, it is calories in as well. So when we work with companies, it's here's not just the exercise program, here's how to cook differently, here's how to think about nutrition,
Absolutely.
but then also areas like sleep. If you're not sleeping the right amount of time, that everything piles in. So you do have to think really holistically about it. And your comment on meeting people where they are, or echoing that comment, Taco Bell is where people are. So either you can say we don't have anything to do with it, or, and hats off to you, getting Taco Bell to put on healthy options is a huge win. So I think that's definitely the way to see it. One of the questions that we've got, Mayor Cornett, from a lot of people on the call is they are bought into everything that you're saying, and particularly within HR, these are people who go into HR because they've got a desire to help people and they want to make their company better, their colleagues better. What advice would you give to people who are maybe starting their career or in the middle of their career of how they can make that impact within their companies and through their companies in their communities?
Well, I think just being able to talk to people about things that they may not feel comfortable talking about. I think HR people are generally really good at that. Whether it's talking about health or finances or a relationship inside the company. Um, uh, I think HR people have become really good at breaking down barriers and finding out what people really think and what might really motivate them to make more positive steps in their best interest and the company's best interest. As you said, if you're in an HR department, it's probably because you care about people in general. And it's real easy in today's hectic, world where, we have too much stress on our daily lives, to lose sight of the fact that there are really people in your life that care about you. And I think that's why, HR directors have kind of developed that reputation. And fortunately, in some, very stressful environments, it can be one of the few friendly faces a person will interact with on a given day.
And as I look back at what you said about what you did in Oklahoma City, there was the publicity piece, there was the message to companies, the message to the population, but also you did a number of things in making the city itself a better place to live a healthy life. And this is an area just on a personal level very dear to myself and to us as a company at Burnalong, is making cities more walkable. So can you speak a bit about what you did in Oklahoma City?
No, I'm happy to, because, as I mentioned, putting people on the diet, was sort of a publicity stunt to get a conversation going. I didn't have any idea where that might lead. But what it led to was something that was very permanent and very substantial, because in the process of studying my city and why it had an obesity issue, I realized that it was because we had completely designed the city around automobile travel. And we had really left the pedestrian or a bicycle community on the sidelines. It's urban sprawl is a big issue in Oklahoma City, and we hadn't done enough to create environments for sidewalks to be built. And so virtually we had built, literally hundreds of subdivisions and neighborhoods that had no walkability at all. And so we had kind of indirectly through the decades created kind of that drive-in type, eat on the run type environment. When you built a church or you built a large building or, any sort of government building, it seemed like one of the most prominent architectural features was the automobile drop-off, as if no one would ever walk, in our community. And very, very few people were. So now to get to the point of where my answer is going, once we had penetrated the message throughout the community about the dangers of obesity and how our autocentric, lifestyle was kind of helping to, well, wasn't helping, the waistlines of our citizens, we then went to them and said, let's change our infrastructure. And so we had some large initiatives coming up with hundreds of millions of dollars available without a tax increase. And in that large package, we were able to put things like sidewalks, jogging and biking paths, senior wellness centers. We were investing in the sports of canoe, kayak, and rowing. And we were building a lot of really impressive parks and new boulevards that were more pedestrian friendly. And so, not every city has the opportunity or the taxation capacity to take that on. We did, but our citizens had to vote on it. And if we hadn't have had the conversation about obesity, and in the process, took on the longer conversation of how our built environment was part of the issue, I don't know if we'd have been able to get 50% of our citizens to use their tax dollars on sidewalks and parks, when in the past it had been to build, largely just large structures, large buildings, sports arenas or libraries or expo centers, things like that were for economic development. What I kind of came to the conclusion was that the quality of life in our community was directly related to economic development because you had to attract people to your community. You can't really attract businesses if the businesses come to the conclusion that the people that work for them aren't going to be happy once they get in your community. So the quality of life that is improved by jogging and biking paths and sidewalks and parks is part of the economic development package. But it wasn't part of Oklahoma City's economic development package 20 or 30 years ago. These are all kind of new things that we learned along the way as we kind of discussed obesity openly and started meeting with our civil engineers and said, look, we've built this city around the car. Now let's build it around people. So think differently when you're designing a road or a neighborhood. Let's think differently about how people can interact and not just think about how fast we can move cars around.
It's I'm hoping some of our friends in the Baltimore and Maryland governments who are listening in can send those messages. It's been a big campaign of ours, especially where we've got different cities and companies using us. If you walk down the street, you can't walk down the street safely, and you talk about people's kids to go out and ride their bikes. You don't want kids doing that if there's no sidewalk. And so, what are the kids meant to be doing? What advice would you give to local people within communities of how to make that case to their local elected officials to push for sidewalks and walkability initiatives?
Well, I think it's, to a certain extent, it's generational. It's the millennial generation, the generation coming in after the millennial generation that has a different set of priorities in what type of city they're looking for. And so, I think you need a low cost of living. You need to get rid of traffic congestion. But you also need to have a walkable city with lots of green spaces if you want to attract highly educated 20-somethings. And when you get right down to it, you're not going to be successful in job creation if you can't attract a workforce of highly educated 20-somethings. And that's really what every city around the world is trying to do. And, I named my book The Next American City. And really, that's kind of the theme of the book. What is that next generation workforce, a group that has choices about where they live? What are they really looking for? And it's a different set of things than my generation was looking for. And so I think from a leadership standpoint, you have to remember you're not trying to attract your peers to move to the city. You're trying to attract that younger generation to a city. And they want to live in a city that gets it, that understands health and wellness and the fact that they want to be active and ride a bike or walk. They don't want to think, I have to drive somewhere. In most communities, they're going to need to own a car. They'll accept that, although they'd still prefer not to. But they want options. And so I think city leaders are wise to try and figure out how can we create neighborhoods where you don't have to own a car.
Mm.
And if you can do that, I think you're going to find a long list of people that want to live there.
Sure. It's you mentioned your book, and we've received a number of questions about the book. And for anyone who's not aware, the book, The Next American City, was published by Penguin and Random House. We are going to be giving out some copies of the book as prizes, so stay tuned after the webinar for that as well. How much of the book and well, let me ask the question differently, is what would you do differently as mayor, knowing what you know now and having written the book and all the lessons in that book?
Oh gosh, I was mayor for 14 years, so eventually I got to do just about everything that I had checked off. Um, I think I would have taken more advantage from a leadership standpoint. All of the people who wanted to help, almost every CEO in the community at one time or another said, "Hey, if you ever need anything, call me." Well, they're busy people. They're running their companies. I don't think I called and asked for enough help. I think I tried to do too much by myself. Um, and I realized now they really did want to help. I wouldn't have been asking them to do something they didn't want to do. And so I think from a leadership standpoint, I need to realize that I could have had an even larger impact on my city if I would have activated all of the people who asked me to asked or raised their hand and said, "If you need anything, let me know." I should have activated more of them, and we could have accomplished more.
And on that subject of leadership and asking people for things, you had incredible success. You were elected 4 times. You chose not to run for a 5th time. You got all these accolades. I'm sure, I am guessing that it wasn't all smooth sailing along the way. And one of the questions that we've got is how did you deal, and how do you advise people to deal with no's and rejections and pushbacks along the way?
Oh wow, yeah. I mean, there were days when you'd receive really bad news, or we were negotiating with labor unions, and that didn't always go peacefully, or as well as I wanted it to go. And I think one of the advantages I had was I'd been in the public eye my whole adult life because I had been a television broadcaster early, and so I kind of understood you got to have thick skin, and at the end of the day, you got to be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, "Did I do the right things?" And if you can, that's got to be enough. And with social media becoming more and more prominent, and the unfairness of what people are able to say or communicate, I think you've got to be able to have an awareness of what your true north is and what you're about, and be able to ignore to a certain extent all of the attacks or the unfair things that might be said against you. And I'm gonna have to change locations because I have to plug my computer in. I just noticed the battery's wearing down. So go ahead and talk. I'm just going to plug it into a hard line.
This is the this is one of the beauties of working from home, is you get cameos from kids, pets, and power being down. How you think about, on that vein of leadership, one of the challenges for so many leaders of companies and indeed cities and right now is obviously COVID and the changed nature of work with people being remote. What advice would you give to mayors and leaders of companies and executives on how to engage remote workers, remote team members, when you're not getting that day-to-day interaction with them?
Well, I think, people spend so much time in front of their computers anymore, and it's not all about work. It's where people, generally gather all of their information. It's completely different from, the world that I grew up in, when you grabbed a newspaper or watched, a real television set, you're looking at your digital input, where you're looking at your email. It's how you consume all sorts of information and video, and frankly, it's how you get information on health and wellness as well. So I think anything that you can do to provide health and wellness information from a digital standpoint is going to be helpful to people, because they're busy and that's what they're used to consuming at this point. The family doesn't gather around the Ed Sullivan Show and watch one television show like they did when I was a kid. It's an entirely different world, and we have to adapt all of the ways that we communicated with people and things that we offered them for their own betterment or their own information or their own entertainment, and put it into a mechanism that they're used to and willing to consume. So it's evolving, but it's much different than the traditional ways of communicating to people.
One thing that is very striking about what you did in Oklahoma City was how it really was a unifying cause that everyone could get behind. It's not a political cause that is divisive. And one question that's popped up from the audience is, in the highly divided country that we find ourselves in right now, is wellness an area that could unite people behind?
Yeah. No, it absolutely is, and we need to be gravitating toward those things. Health and wellness, there shouldn't be a partisan issue, and I really don't think it is. It's about personal responsibility. And I'm a registered Republican, ran nonpartisan in Oklahoma City. But when I get through making a speech, I don't think people have any idea what political party I'm a part of, because it doesn't need to be part of the health and wellness agenda. But you're absolutely right. I mean, people are divided in this country, and that's I'm for assimilation. I mean, I'm thinking we need to look for areas where we agree and then build upon it. I don't like the idea that we divide up. I just don't think that's helpful as a country.
And some people are curious, how did you manage to convince the franchise to move to Oklahoma?
You mean businesses?
The NBA franchise.
Oh, well, that's a whole nother chapter in the book. But the bottom line was, when I was elected mayor of Oklahoma City, and my predecessors had done some things that I thought were worthwhile, and that we could build upon, I realized that the brand of Oklahoma City had been damaged by the bombing that took place in 1995. And so in 2004, this was less than 10 years after the bombing, and that's when I became mayor. If I walked into a room in some other part of the country and said the words Oklahoma City, the audience immediately was thinking back to that dreadful day when the bomb went off and the horrific pictures that the news disseminated. And we'd been branded by tragedy. And, people felt sorry for us, but I couldn't build an economy out of sympathy. And so what I realized was the best and fastest way I could improve the brand of Oklahoma City was to get a sports team to carry our name. And so I started visiting with the commissioners of the NBA and the NHL, so pro basketball and pro hockey for your international audience. And ultimately, I mean, a lot of things happened in the meantime, but ultimately that led to an NBA franchise coming to Oklahoma City, and then a relocated franchise moving here from Seattle to give us kind of a permanent major league status. So now if someone says Oklahoma City, there's a better chance that they're going to think about the Thunder, which is our NBA team, than there is about the bombing, which was a horrific thing that took place 25 years ago. So, I mean, I really do think our brand is much improved, and the NBA team, more than any other single thing, had more to do with that. It also, I think, sent a message to people that Oklahoma City was relevant. And I think when you're trying to attract young people, and again, it's about attracting highly educated 20-somethings and their friends. They want to live in a place that, even if they don't go to a game, they want to live in a place that seems relevant to the rest of the world. And having an NBA team helps make your city relevant. You got to have a lot of different things, but having a major league sports team takes you from being a minor league city to a major league city. And that's a significant step that we were able to accomplish.
One question that's come up that I think is very timely right now is about resiliency, with the stress and the pressures that people are dealing with now. We thought we were in the clear. There's now the Delta variant. How do you advise leaders of cities and companies, as you do, about building that resiliency amongst their populations and amongst their employees?
Well, what I see is just the stress that people are going through. If you're a person with children, then there's a good chance you also have parents, and you get caught in that. You want to take care of your parents, you want to take care of your kids, and oh, by the way, you need to take care of yourself. And there's so much stress in our lives, and the Delta variant, or the continuant health issues that we're facing, are just one more extremely emotional weight that we're carrying around on our shoulders. And so anything I think we can do to increase exercise, or to increase the mental health opportunities for our employees, is going to be helpful. I really do feel like we do a disservice when we just act like people are supposed to tough it out. And because I think people really do need help. There's mental health and wellness and exercise, and all of those things are significant factors in a person being productive and healthy. And I think for too long, we just looked at a couple of aspects of a life and basically said people are going to have to figure it out for themselves. Well, I think we need to do a better job of allowing opportunities for them to figure it out for themselves.
That's one of the things that we've seen as if you could say, a positive through the past year, has been more of a willingness to talk about mental health challenges, and more of a focus on holistic wellness, which gets back to your point at the start in Oklahoma, which is, it wasn't just about going to the gym and exercising. It's about nutrition. It's about all these different components to people's health, if you really want to make that shift. We're over time.
Okay.
This has been really, really terrific. So a big thank you to you, Mayor Cornett, for joining us. Thank you for the example that you've set to cities around the country and globally, and to leaders around the country and indeed globally, on health and wellness and leadership. As a reminder, Mayor Cornett's book, The Next American City, is out. It's a great read, highly recommended. And I think perhaps maybe like the takeaway point is one thing that you mentioned at the start, which is that it's about doing better. It's about making small steps. And that's really the job of leaders of companies, or people who wish to make changes within their companies and their cities. It's not about trying to achieve everything in one go, but these small steps, these small improvements really makes a big difference.
Absolutely. Thanks for what you're doing too.
Thank you. And thank you so much for joining us. And thank you everyone for their questions and for joining us today. Bye-bye.